I never thought my life would come to this. Sitting across from my boss in his lavish office, my hands clenched together as he made an offer that sounded more like a twisted business deal than anything resembling reality. "I want you to date my son," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "And I'll pay you handsomely for it." I blinked, convinced I had misheard him. "Excuse me?" Mr. Callahan, the man who signed my paychecks, leaned back in his leather chair, completely unfazed. The golden glow of the city skyline cast sharp angles across his face, making him seem even more unreadable. "My son, Adrian," he repeated. "He's been withdrawn since his last relationship ended. I need someone to bring him out of it. Someone I can trust." 1,000 thoughts clashed in my mind. I had only worked as his assistant for 6 months, handling schedules, emails, and coffee runs. Not whatever this was. "Mr. Callahan, I don't think I'm the right person for this." He folded his hands on the desk, studying me. "You need the money, don't you?" My stomach twisted. He wasn't wrong. Rent was overdue, student loans loomed over me like storm clouds, and my younger sister relied on me for support. Still, selling my time, my affection, felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I could live with. Sensing my hesitation, he continued, "I don't expect you to deceive him. Just spend time with him. Let things unfold naturally. If nothing comes of it, fine. But if you manage to get through to him," he slid a check across the desk. The amount made my breath catch. More than enough to change my life. My fingers hovered over it. "Does Adrian know about this?" A flicker of something unreadable passed through his gaze. "No, and he doesn't need to." That was the moment I should have walked away. But desperation is a powerful thing. I picked up the check. "Just get him to open up," Mr. Callahan said, his tone satisfied. "Make him believe in love again." I swallowed hard and nodded. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I tried to convince myself this was just another job, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But deep down, a voice whispered, "What happens when feelings get involved?" I ignored it, because the next day, I was going to meet Adrian Callahan, and nothing in my life would ever be the same. Adrian Callahan was nothing like I expected. I had envisioned someone cold, arrogant, maybe even spoiled. Instead, the man who greeted me at the cafe that afternoon was quiet, guarded, and far too observant for my comfort. "You work for my father?" he asked as he slid into the seat across from me, his sharp blue eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. I nodded, forcing a casual smile. "Just his assistant, but he thought we might get along." Adrian let out a dry chuckle, stirring his coffee. Of course he did. Silence stretched between us. I had prepared for small talk, but something about his demeanor made it difficult to break through the surface. His posture was relaxed, but there was tension in his shoulders, a kind of weariness that suggested he had long grown used to disappointments. I tried again. "So, what do you do?" His fingers tightened around the cup. "Nothing at the moment." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he exhaled, leaning back. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but I know how this ends. My father introduces me to someone, hoping I'll snap out of it. They pretend to care until they realize I'm not worth the trouble. Then they leave." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes flickering up to meet mine. "You don't have to waste your time." A lump formed in my throat. I had expected resistance, but not this quiet resignation, as if he had already accepted loneliness as his fate. "Maybe I just like coffee," I said, lifting my cup. "And maybe I don't mind wasting time." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. But he didn't push me away. And so we met again. Each time, the silences grew shorter, the conversations longer. I learned that he used to paint, but hadn't touched a brush in years. That he played piano as a child, but hated performing. That his last relationship had ended badly, leaving behind wounds that hadn't fully healed. And somewhere between those stolen moments, between the laughter and the quiet confessions, I forgot that this was supposed to be a job. I started looking forward to his texts, to the way his gaze softened when I spoke. I told myself it was just part of the act. But when he took my hand for the first time, his touch hesitant yet lingering, something inside me unraveled. I was falling for him, and I was lying to him. The thought haunted me as he smiled, completely unaware of the truth. I told myself I would end it before it went too far. But by then it already had. Guilt was a slow poison, creeping into every moment I spent with Adrian. It tainted the way I laughed at his jokes, the way I reached for his hand, the way I lost myself in the quiet warmth of his gaze. Each stolen second felt borrowed, as if the truth were a storm gathering on the horizon, waiting to break us apart. And then it did. I should have told him myself. I should have confessed before it was too late. But fate had other plans. It happened on a night that should have been perfect. We had spent the evening at a quiet restaurant, sharing stories over candlelight. He looked lighter somehow, less burdened, and when he reached across the table, threading his fingers through mine, I felt something close to happiness, until my phone buzzed. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But when I saw Mr. Callahan's name flashing on the screen, dread curled in my stomach. Adrian noticed. "Who is it?" My hesitation was enough. His expression shifted. Before I could react, he reached across the table, plucking the phone from my hands. He didn't unlock it. He didn't have to. The notification on the screen was enough to shatter everything. "Mr. Callahan, you've done well. Your payment is ready." Silence fell between us. Adrian's grip tightened around my phone. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." My mouth went dry. "Adrian, He pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the floor. The look in his eyes was worse than anger. It was betrayal, a deep, aching kind of hurt that made my chest tighten. "You were paid," he said, his voice eerily calm. "To date me." I swallowed, my heart pounding. "At first, yes. But it's not like that anymore." His laugh was hollow. "Not like that. So what? You started playing pretend, and somewhere along the way, you decided you actually liked me?" He shook his head. "I should have known." "Please," I whispered, standing. "Let me explain." But he was already walking away. I chased after him onto the quiet street, desperation clawing at my throat. "Adrian, just listen to me." He stopped, turning sharply. "To what?" "More lies." His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw something raw beneath the betrayal, pain. My chest ached. "I never meant to hurt you." His gaze locked onto mine, searching for something, maybe a reason to forgive me. But then his expression hardened. "You already did." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the cold, the weight of my choices crashing down all at once. I wanted to run after him, but I knew I had already lost him. The days after Adrian walked away felt endless. I quit my job. I couldn't bear to face Mr. Callahan, not after everything. The money sat untouched in my account, tainted, a reminder of the price I had paid for a love I never deserved. I tried to reach out, texts, calls, even a letter I left at his doorstep. He ignored them all. And I didn't blame him. Weeks passed, then months. The weight of regret became something I carried with me, an ache that refused to fade. I told myself I had no right to expect forgiveness, that this was my punishment. But some part of me still hoped. And then, one afternoon, fate intervened. I was leaving a bookstore when I saw him. He was across the street, standing by a cafe window, staring at a blank canvas on the table before him. A brush rested between his fingers, unmoving. My heart lurched. He was painting again. Before I could stop myself, I crossed the street, stepping inside. He didn't look up as I approached, his focus on the empty canvas. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," I said quietly. His hand stilled. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. I braced myself for anger, for resentment. But what I found was something softer. Wary, but not as broken as before. "I thought I was done with painting," he murmured, tapping the brush against the table. But then I realized, I miss creating something that's real. His eyes met mine. "No matter how messy it gets." I swallowed hard. "Adrian, He shook his head. "I don't need an apology." Surprise flickered through me. "You don't?" "No," he said, exhaling. "Because I know you meant it. The feelings, at least. And that's the worst part." He offered a small, sad smile. "If it had all been a lie, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so much." I felt my chest tighten. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," he admitted, setting the brush down. But you did. Silence stretched between us. There was so much I wanted to say, but none of it would change the past. Finally, Adrian sighed. I don't hate you. The words were quiet, but they unraveled something inside me. But I don't know if I can trust you again. I nodded, accepting the truth. I understand. He studied me for a long moment, then glanced at the canvas. Maybe someday we'll find our way back. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. I gave him a small smile, stepping back. I hope so. And as I walked away, for the first time in months, the weight in my chest felt just a little lighter.